Nice.
All right. And we are back.
Yeah, after a false start, but no one needs to know about that.
Right.
No, no,
Anyway,
nothing.
so, well, we're doing what we said we would not be doing again. We're talking about the Clone Wars one more time.
Listen, I'm with you, everyone. Don't worry. We're moving on after this. I've had enough of it as well. It's all good.
I promise this is the last one. This is the last one. Jeff, if I come to you with another TCW idea,
But no,
tell me no.
no.
Tell me no.
Like
Okay, this
not
is
doing
probably
it.
the last one simply because this one is very different from our last
Mm,
videos. Our last three we're talking about how it doesn't fit. This one is actually talking about how it could have fit. Uh,
yeah.
and like I was telling you, Jeff, beforehand, this is coming off of something that Jeff and I discussed for probably about 10 minutes in either video one or video two. I haven't gone through to actually
At some
find it.
point.
It's
Yep.
too long. These videos are too long to go back through and look them up. Like I'm not gonna do that. Okay, I'm not. It's not worth the time or the effort.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Right.
No. Hmm.
Anytime I listen to my videos, and I do say listen, I don't watch.
You've seen that head enough. You know what it looks like.
Right. So I mean, who wants to look at their own face? I mean, come on.
Mm.
I have to do this just for the video. So
Womp
so
womp.
anyway, so as we have discussed previously, it could have worked if they had done a story not focused on Anakin and Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
And we specifically stated Plo Koon
Hmm.
because Plo Koon has oddly the least amount of EU content of pretty much all of the um, uh, major council members.
Yeah.
He's in. Is he in all three of them? Yeah, he's in all
Yeah.
three. He's in
Hmm.
all three prequels. He is a member of the Jedi Council through all three, and somehow he has very little about him. He has a reference the in the post Return of the Jedi EU, and
Hmm.
he has a couple of places in like the prequel era period.
Yeah.
But
Well, the comics in particular, he got
right,
a pretty good run there in the prequel.
right, in the stuff before episode one and in the stuff between episode one and episode two,
Yeah.
he's got some good stuff in there. But his the amount of attention given to him is about maybe a little more than what Yaddle got.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be fair.
Maybe a little bit more, but not a whole
Hmm.
lot more. Even I feel like Kiadi Mundi even had more, and
Well,
he had
Kiadi
very
Mundi had like an entire comic just about him, like the whole
right,
series. It
right,
was it was just the Kiadi Mundi special.
right.
You know, and we got to see his home world. We got to meet his family. We got that. And again, this is pre Clone Wars. This was all
Right.
pre Episode One, actually. I think for the most part. But
Yeah, those that comic came out as one of the like
like
as
a
one of the
teaser almost.
advertisements for Phantom Menace, simply because
Yeah.
it was just like they just released a bunch of like good
Mm.
stories about different characters. I think they had a Mace Windu one. I don't
Yep.
remember exactly, but like they had like a handful of like mostly comics that were
Mm.
just a handful of short stories about a handful of significant Jedi,
Yeah.
and
Which was really, really cool to have, by the
right,
way, because you got to read all about this Jedi and then see him in the movies, and then he didn't do much. But
yeah,
he
yeah,
was in episode one, and so like, oh, I know that guy.
right,
I read his comic, yay! Which was obviously really, really cool. And also from vague memory, I need to go back and read it. But as a side note, I do like how when you're reading the early Marvel years of comics before the movie started dropping, and they kept making problems or needed retconning simply because the other movies weren't made or they weren't sure what was going on. I do recall a really weird looking Trade Federation ship for some odd reason popping up in the Kiadi Mundi comics because I don't think they knew what they were going to look like at the time, and it
I
was
don't
like
think
a
they did. I don't think they
no,
did.
it was like a Trade Federation cruiser, and it was patrolling near Tatooine for some reason. Like it was just way off script because, of course, during the movie, Obi-Wan's like, "Here, Tatooine, the Trade Federation have no presence there. It's out of the way, all this kind of stuff." And then the Kiadi Mundi
Right.
comic is like, "The Trade Federation are patrolling Tatooine." Like, what? So I do like the history sort of repeated itself. We can go back and look at like the early Russ Manning strips or the early Marvel comics and just think, oh, it's kind of quaint to read the stuff that happened before the movies come out, and then it just happened again in 1998 for the
Right.
1999 movie. So
Right.
history repeats itself,
It does. It
which is
does.
lovely, and it doesn't take away from the comic. It literally is like two
No.
panels, so
No.
it's all good. It's all
No.
good.
But
And
yeah,
also, I've
so
dragged this video away from the Clone Wars. Everyone, you can thank me later. So,
okay. So as we were saying beforehand,
hmm,
if Plo Koon had been the focal point character, because again, I feel like he's probably the least focused on
yep,
major character. He's got so much about him that's just kind of filler. Like
hmm,
he has a good Wikipedia page in for the Legends Wikipedia page, and even the canon one's pretty decent,
I
but
wouldn't
it's
know.
mostly filler. Mostly filler. Hardly anything focuses on Plo Koon. I mean, I barely look at at the canon stuff. I just
Yeah,
it's what it takes you to automatically, and then I scroll down to where I can hit the legend, go to
yep.
Legends, and I go to Legends because
No, that's
that's what
fair.
I'm there for. I'm looking for the Legends stuff.
I was going to say, in somewhat of an ironic twist, I've only just thought I think we had more of a focus on Plo Koon's niece than Plo Koon. At least she got a
In,
story of her own.
oh, in the stories, yeah, I think she had a
Well,
whole story.
the whole
She had
comic, yeah, like
yeah, she
a
had a
whole
whole
comic,
comic focused
yeah,
on her.
yeah. So she gets one.
Right. He got like nothing focused on him. He was always a side character or a background character. He never
Mm,
got anything focused on him.
no.
Like, which is funny because he's there
Hmm.
everywhere. He's always there. And
He's a very cool design. I've got a couple of figures of
Mhm.
him, and like he makes a really cool like toy to look at. Like he looks
Right.
unique,
Well,
very unique.
and
Like,
and the CGI model for him for the Clone Wars, it was actually really well done. And they
hmm,
even made it so that like he kind of like like that so that you could kind of see expressions for
yeah,
him, which is difficult. I mean, they did kind of. I mean, it is a cartoon, so you know you're allowed to
you can
break
do a
some of
bit
the
more with it.
physics rules a little bit, but
Yeah,
they did a good job of kind of bordering of towing that line.
yep,
And I so for me, and because the actor who voices Obi-Wan is the same actor who voices Plo Koon.
hmm,
Like I for some James Arnold Taylor, that's his
yep.
name. Uh,
That one.
wonderful, wonderful guy. I was so devastated when I missed my opportunity to meet him at the last convention that I was at, but we were on a time crunch and I had other stuff going on
Uh huh.
the next day, and we had to get moving because you know we had to get
You had
we
to
had to go somewhere
skedaddle.
else. But
Yeah.
so you know I took the opportunity I did get, but you know
But yeah,
I,
in terms of expression, I was going to say that that's not a massive thing though, because if you think
no
about a lot of the main characters, like Darth Vader, not known for a lot of facial expression.
no
Boba Fett, not a lot of facial expression going on. Clone Troopers, pretty funk.
right
But yet we still get a lot of emotion out of these guys. We still get a lot.
right
We can feel a lot of what they're going through and that kind of thing, regardless.
right
And Plo Koon's not even that bad. It's just a mask and a couple of eye
right
protectors. So yeah, in if anyone was ever going to say, oh, we couldn't focus on Plo Koon because of that, get out.
right
There are characters where we literally cannot see their face, and we get all the
right.
range of emotions necessary. So that's
Oh
not a
yeah,
thing.
and
Mm.
that's the thing. And I feel like a Plo Koon focused storyline would have held. I think it would have held a lot of more people's attention than
Hmm.
George, Dave Filoni, or any of the other execs really think it would. Because
Yes.
like that's the thing. Most people would say, "Oh, like that's just not a good idea." I'm like, we've had so much Anakin focus. I guarantee you, the kids would rather not see more Anakin.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
especially after
Hmm.
we know where his story ends. Okay,
Mm.
I was 13. Yeah, this was 2000 or no 2007 when it came out when the
Yep.
movie came out. So I was 12.
Hmm.
So I was 12 when they started the whole clone TCW thing with the movie, which kind of destroys the whole thing in and of itself
Yeah, I
because
think I think 12-year-old you got ripped off. 12-year-old me got the
right.
Phantom Menace, and you got the Clone Wars movie.
Oh, I
Like
agree. I agree. I
that's not
mean,
fair. That's not
no,
fair.
no,
No,
it's
no.
not.
I
But
demand a refund. That's not fair. Yeah, you've been
hey,
rorted.
10-year-old me got return got Revenge of the Sith. So
Oof, yeah,
who really wins? Who really
yeah. No,
wins?
that is fair. That is fair.
you know so that was the thing,
Yeah.
but yeah, I will say that the difference in just the way that the tonal difference is significant, and that's fine. I mean, it is a cartoon, and even Clone Wars, the Tartakovsky Clone Wars, even it is tonally different from the movies, and that's because
Hmm.
again, it's a cartoon. It's got to be a little sillier. It's got to have a little more kiddishness. It's a cartoon. That's how they're made.
Yep.
But
100%.
and so like I will never bash a cartoon for being a little cheesy. Okay, unless it's like Batman the animated series, in which case, if like anytime there's a cheesy episode for that, I'm like, this is who allowed this episode?
Yeah.
Which there's only
Why is
like
this
three in
running?
the whole series, but
Yeah. Well, when you consider how cheesy, Ewoks in the Droid series were, I
right,
mean,
right,
extra
those were
cheese, and
ridiculous.
we love those, or at least I do.
Right.
Um, so Star Wars is certainly allowed its level of cheese. It really
Oh yeah.
is
No,
quite a lot
and
of it, in
I
fact.
have no problem with cheesiness. I have nothing
No.
against cheesiness. So like this is like so again like it's nothing about the way that the show itself was going. It was the fact that the show
Hmm.
is meant to take place at a level that doesn't make sense for it.
No.
But in order for it to work, it would have made sense had they just cut out Anakin and Obi-Wan. Just cut them out.
Yep.
We don't need to focus on them. Their story has been told and told and told and told and told and told and told. If you want
Hmm.
their stuff, go watch the micro series. Go
Go read
read
the
a comic.
comics, read the
Go read a
novels.
comic for crying out loud. Like
Yeah, read the
seriously,
novels. Go nuts.
please
Go
read the
crazy.
novels,
Yeah.
please. But
Plus.
if you struggle with just reading, comics are your friend. Also,
Yeah.
audiobooks.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Wonderful things. They're wonderful things.
Hmm.
But when you Plo Koon is an ideal character to focus on because we don't have much on him,
No.
especially at this time. We didn't, especially at this time.
Yeah, and so it gives the writers that freedom that they're really hoping to do by just steamrolling over existing lore, where
Right,
you don't have to because you can just go with a character that's not much touched on. So you don't need
right,
to have a lot of background on him, which would just been perfect.
right. I mean, I feel like even Kit Fisto, who was introduced in to our lives in Attack of the Clones, and he wasn't even a member of the council yet,
Hmm.
with that awesome smile. I mean,
Yeah, that smile.
that smile.
Oh dear.
We all love it.
Yeah,
Like I feel like he got more attention in the Clone Wars, and
absolutely.
like it's what's funny to me is like we get introduced to characters who are going to be in uh who weren't even actually established characters yet in the
Hmm.
comics it that become noticeable characters in Revenge of the Sith.
Yep.
And it's just like we had so many characters that could have and should have that could have not been touched on in the comics and the books that, you know, like we have so many of these characters,
Yeah.
but Plo Koon, who's been around from episode one, well, I think he had an appearance in a comic before,
In the
but he,
Republic comics, yeah.
yeah, in one of the early Republic comics before the Phantom Menace came out.
Yeah.
But I don't think he was a focal point character even in that. Um, but he's been around, so why aren't we getting much of his story? And
Hmm.
we've had stuff from before Attack of the Clones. We had plenty of stuff. Second, okay,
Yeah.
important going on. Uh, but it's just like he would be the ideal character, and supposedly, and I don't know if this was retconned into the story at some point later, or if this was already established or if this was established in the books somewhere, that Anakin actually painted Plo Koon's ship,
Yeah.
the Blade of Doran, which
Hmm.
I was surprised. I don't remember if that was in a book or not, because again, I haven't read a lot of a lot of the Clone Wars books, but I don't know if that was in a book or in like
Yeah.
in a note or something, because I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, like a lot of Star Wars, would have to go scraping through.
But
If I went through my,
it is painted
yeah,
similarly to the Azure Angel, so I get it.
yeah.
I don't know if that was just something that one of the writers just decided to add into a detail, or if that was a Leland Chia statement. I don't know.
Yeah, just a
I'd have to.
tweet, a random tweet, and that.
I mean, it could be, but I mean, Leland Chi is the definitive canon person, so
Yeah.
he defines canon. And,
Well, you at least used to.
well, he did define canon. I have honestly no idea what he does now. I don't even know if he knows what he does now. Honestly,
No, although
I
as I've
feel like
pointed out,
I feel like he does stuff that
yeah,
he does something. I know he
yeah,
does something. They're still paying him.
they're paying him to hang around. They're paying him to be quiet. No, the two quotes that I absolutely love about him, and I'm going to misquote them now because I don't have written down or whatever, but I do love that during George's tenure. So this is like the height of the EU. There's that Leland Shee quote how it comes down to continuity, and he's like, "Look, we take continuity very seriously. If Mace Windu has a purple lightsaber, and he uses Mace Windu's purple lightsaber as his example, he's like, we need to explain how that happened, and that becomes canon. Like it's a question we can definitively answer with facts from the universe. So that's kind of his thing.
Hmm.
And then there was almost once Disney had taken over, there was like an almost verbatim quote from Leland Shee that was almost the exact same quote. I think he's talking about Forlom though now. But otherwise the quote was structured exactly the same. And he's like, yeah, canon is a fluid, malleable thing. So if we just say that Forlom is a droid, that's not necessarily true the next day. Like we can change it because canon is never changing, ever evolving thing. But it's just funny when you see the two quotes together because it shows and highlights more than anything else the way focus shifted from say the mid 90s and the 2000s to what we've got now, which is sad, definitely. But yeah, yeah, it's I could probably find the quotes, to be honest. I could probably find them, but yeah, when you put the two of them side by side, and
Oh yeah,
it's tremendous to watch. But it's something we all know anyway. We
right,
don't necessarily need the two quotes to know that things went downhill at a certain point.
right. Well, and we
Mm.
all know that Leland Chi is like he is a person who defines canon for the fans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He does, and we definitely know that the philosophies of George Lucas and the philosophies of Disney and Kathleen Kennedy are very different.
Yeah, just a little bit. Not that you'd notice.
They're treating the thing is that what made Star Wars so different from other major sci-fi uh space-based
Mm-hmm.
sci-fi fandoms is that its expanded stuff was established as canon,
Yep.
and they created such a concise way of doing it ultimately, yes, the movies countermand everything else, but everything
Hmm.
else was canon. And there were times where they did try to kind of align the comics or the books or whatever with the movies. You can see that,
Hmm.
especially in Revenge of the Sith, with the
Yeah.
reference to Voss moving his
Hmm.
troops to Boz Pity,
Yeah.
because it was because Boz Pity at that point it was already taken area. Seleucami was being fought, and
Hmm.
once that during uh during Revenge of the Sith, and he moves to Boz Pity to as a staging area before he moves on to Kashyyyk himself.
Yeah.
You know, which is funny because you have three Jedi Masters on Kashyyyk at one time. That's a
It's an
lot.
important planet. It's an
I
important
mean,
planet.
you have the Grand Master himself. Okay,
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
Grand
but
Master,
yeah, but
and
good
then you got
relations with the
two
Wookiees he
two
has.
Jedi Masters, one of which was probably on the level of consideration for council membership when the
Yep.
spot was opened up, and then you have Quinlan Voss, who is like just like the ultimate crazy Jedi. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And one that was going to be, I
yeah.
don't know. There's going to be a long story there with Quinlan Voss, which I think we've covered before as well. But the idea that
Oh yeah.
George was the one that dragged him back from death, basically, when they were going to kill
Oh,
him off. And then
oh
George said,
yeah.
"No, no, 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 stop that," because this is
Right.
how closely he was reading the comics, and you always hear, "Oh, he didn't care about the EU." It's like he was keeping up with it pretty heavily because he said, "No, no,
Right.
no, this guy you've just killed off, we're not doing that because I need him for a TV show that's coming up, which also never got made." But
Right. Right.
yeah, talk about
I wish they had I wish
mm,
that had gotten made. There were so many things that never got made.
oh yeah, and would have, and yeah, so would have, should have, could have, but no, I do like that sort of stuff. The fact that George is just like cherry picking from the comics, mainly from the comics, being a very visual guy, but
Right.
again, and the fact that that was so heavily in episode three, like all this kind of stuff, like mentioning Master Boss, and yeah, like it was a very very contiguous universe. And I think the other thing too that I quite liked, and probably shows how much care and effort was put into the old EU, was that they didn't have to include the old Marvel comics, because when they switched over to Dark Horse, and a lot of the Marvel comics were written at a time when I guess not much of the universe was established. Some of
Right.
them were written before Empire Strikes Back came out, and so they weren't quite in line. They didn't have to. They could have just
No.
pop in the bin. But right up until the end, there was still stories referencing them. There was still retcons going back. They were still intertwining all those threads together because they didn't want to get rid of anything. They wanted to make it all just one big happy universe, which was fantastic. And it does make rereading a lot of fun, thankfully. So I've
Oh
got that for the
yeah.
rest of my life.
No.
I'm not enjoying any of the new stuff, but I've got all the old stuff to reread and
No.
rewatch over and over.
You can always go back to it,
Yeah.
and I guarantee there's stuff you haven't even read yet, simply because
There's
it's so much.
and there's always connections that you haven't made.
Right.
Like I think one of them that I made just the other day, because I was reading the old Russ Manning strips, and there's at one point where um because again this is before Empire Strikes Back comes out, and Luke's parents are named. It was like
Mhm.
Mistress and Mrs. Tan Skywalker, so we're given basically Anakin's name as Tan Skywalker,
Well,
because they didn't know
we
what was
had
going on.
Anakin's name in
Well, 6 years
episode.
later, they
No,
would they
we
would
had his name in the we were given his name in A New Hope.
the New Hope.
Yeah, his name's he's given it. We get his name in there, don't we?
No,
Don't
no,
we? No, no, you're right. You're right.
yeah,
You're right.
yeah, and
He's just always referred to as your father
yeah,
in the movie. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that's right. That's right. They don't
yeah.
give you his actual name until Return of the Jedi.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
Russ, yeah, and then
Yeah.
Russ. Yeah, I was actually trying to think at what point, but when Anakin's name is first dropped, it was certainly not a New Hope.
Yeah, you're
But
right. I never thought
what
about that.
was yeah, it's like who is his father? And so they gave
It
his
never occurred to
father's
me. It never occurred to me.
Yeah, and
Huh.
they gave his father's name as Tan Skywalker,
Yeah.
and it was one of those things. Was like, well, that's interesting because there was a story written later. It was one of the supplements, I think, for oh goodness gracious, it was one of the tabletop games, but they actually put down that Tan is like a title given to pilots that have actually done
Mhm.
exceptionally well. Because there was a weird typo on one of the TIE Fighter games as well, where a character is referred to as Tan incorrectly, which is just a coincidence, frankly. But then and it was Abel G. Pena, when he went back and he looked at it, he said, well, they've got Tan Skywalker here. We've accidentally called this TIE fighter Tan when the pilot was named not Tan. So we're just going to pretend that that is a label you give an elite pilot. And so they wrote that into a later story. And it didn't actually occur to me until later because I'd read about this, the
Retcon
titles
some
thing.
stuff there.
Yeah, and I've read about the titles thing without really thinking back. I was like, well, it's interesting that they've got this title that you bestow upon a wonderful pilot, and you don't hear much of it. And then I went back and read a comic from 1978. I'm like, oh, I see what you've done. That's clever. So again, it's that thing where they just go back and just pull the oldest stuff, the worst possible retcons, these things that clearly don't make sense in light of information that came later, and they just make it make sense because now, yes,
Right.
Tan Skywalker is in the Honorable Skywalker. Like it's just a title that you give him now,
Right.
and clever, very clever. Um, yeah, but they do that so often, which again is the kind of care that seemed to fall to the wayside when a certain person made a certain animated series about a certain conflict.
Right. Anyway, getting back to the idea of
The certain conflict, getting back to
right.
the certain conflict.
Right. Getting back to the certain conflict and getting into the idea that that a Plo Koon focused series. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
think about all the like there are we could have actually we literally could have gone right into Revenge of the Sith at the end of it because
Mm.
we have Plo's death.
Yeah,
We have his
on the
death on
screen,
screen, but
there he
we
is.
don't have we don't have any information about the battle. Like
What
there's
is
nothing
he
on it.
doing there? Yeah.
We all we have is the name of the planet he was on and the name of the battle, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know
Yep.
what was happening. There's so we could have literally gone right into that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Which would have
And
been nice.
Ahsoka still could be alive.
Yeah.
Okay. If she's his apprentice, she's there and she
Mm-hmm.
survives.
Yeah.
Okay. And and there are so many ways this could have gone, so many things. There are so many options. I mean, that's just one good example of a change that they could have made that would not have caused a lot of problems. It would have been a beautiful storyline, a Plo Koon focused story. I mean, yeah, every now and then
Mm.
maybe have an Anakin and Obi-Wan appearance. It's fine, but they should not have been the focal point characters. You want to
Yeah.
focus on a young Jedi? Absolutely. Ahsoka's ideal. She's a perfect character if you want to have a young, non-human but humanoid
Mm.
character. She's a perfect young focus. Yes, I
Yeah.
agree with that. Her role as Anakin's apprentice is not where I would have wanted it. I would have
No.
preferred something like Plo Koon. Sure, I understand, people could argue that it's that I'm going with this because, he's the one who found her.
Mm.
But that's a common thing if you go throughout the EU. Almost 80% of the time, the person who ends up training the Padawan is the person who found them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. It's pretty
Quinlan
common.
Voss trained Ayla. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Mace Windu trained Depa. Yeah, he
Mm-hmm.
trained Depa. Like, obviously, he didn't train her sister, whose name escapes me, and who
No.
looks nothing like her, by the way. Like, I was like, you're telling me that these two
Our genetic siblings.
like you're telling me that this white woman
Mm.
is supposed to be the sister of this woman who has beautiful tan skin. Like, no,
Hmm.
I'm sorry. There is no way they are siblings.
It's like, what's going on? Oh, it could be like kittens. I've seen that with kittens. You never know what they're,
It is, I mean, it is possible,
it's
but it's
possible.
extremely unlikely. And it
Yeah.
also, I also find it weird that only one of them even embraced the Chalactin
Hmm.
background. Like, I find that weird.
But then, as you're saying, why Plo Koon necessarily? And say it's because he does feel like the dropped ball when everyone else does have novels, short stories, comics, games. Sometimes an entire comic issue
Right.
focused solely on them. He does seem to be missing that. So it's like
Right.
we've got this master that we haven't touched on very much, who looks really really cool and seems to have a great story. We've got this Padawan that he found. We need to tell a story during the Clone Wars. And also I guess when you said if you wanted to focus on a young Jedi, there again was well Shah Koon, right? So his niece. It occurs to me as well that you can involve her because even though she wasn't training, she was training under Seldith, Master Seldith at the time.
Which also would have been great to have those two in there.
Yeah, more aliens. Just fling more aliens in while you're at it, and
Seriously. Less
yeah,
humans. Give us less humans.
yeah. Well, that's I think I told you at the time. That's why one of my favorite comics was probably Starfighter. God, what was it called? That Starfighter comic, the one that tied into the Starfighter game, Crossbones. That's right,
Oh,
Crossbones. And what I really liked about that is it's like it's an entire trade paperback. It's 4 issues or 5 issues stuck together as a trade paperback. No humans.
right.
It's in the Star Wars universe, and the Star Wars universe is populated with a ton of aliens, and it's all aliens. The whole thing, it's just aliens from beginning to end. And
Right.
it was almost refreshing to have that. And again, the Clone Wars could have easily been that as well, where you've just got an alien master with his alien apprentice and his alien niece and their alien friend and the alien master. And, and
Would have
occasionally
been great to have literally the clones be the majority of humans in the
the
story.
humans. Yeah.
Like the majority, like every now and then you have a random human character come in as like as a guest
Hmm.
storyline. But
Yeah.
I think it would have been better to go that way. Like obviously, like you've got Mace Windu on the Jedi Council. I mean, we're dealing with a Jedi Council member,
Hmm.
you know, and that would have been fantastic. So, like to actually get more consistent council member stuff,
Yep.
you know, because that's the thing. Like you get like I think I mean, granted, it's been a while since I watched the show, and like I think they have like 2 or 3 moments where it's just, and it's obviously it's usually Obi-Wan based when
Hmm.
after he's on the council, which they don't go into Obi-Wan. No one actually goes into Obi-Wan getting chosen to be on the council. It just happens, and
He just turned up as hello
it's always
there.
a background thing, and in all the
Yeah.
books and in the comics and
Hmm.
even on the show it's like both
Well, they're
like
just waiting for someone to write it, and they didn't want to overwrite what someone
right, I
else
think
was
that's what it
doing, and
was.
then nobody
No
wrote
one
it.
got permission to write the story of Obi-Wan being chosen to sit on the council, which
Yeah, as I
according
said, I'm not usually one for head canon, but in this instance, I'm just going to imagine he just the doors are hello there, and they just said right him, and that's all
right.
it was. That was the whole thing. That's all they needed, and he was on the council at that point. But no, yeah, the whole Anakin and Obi-Wan focus thing, and in a way, and this is probably going to be very unpopular, but in a way, I feel like Ahsoka also took away from that because
Right.
took away from that relationship because we're told that he was, Obi-Wan and Anakin, like they were such a good friend. There's this master apprentice bond, that sort of thing, which just makes Anakin's
Right.
fall that much harder. And when we're finally given a chance on screen to explore the dynamic between the two, you just wedge a child in the middle. And it probably doesn't do them the great benefit that
It-
we could have seen Master and Apprentice bouncing off each other like they did in the comics of the Multimedia Project, like they did in the novels of the Multimedia Project.
right.
They were great, and
And
we don't get
it
a chance to
changes
see
the
that.
dynamic really. It
Mm,
really
yeah,
changes
quite
the
a lot.
dynamic. And it's like I feel like it would have been better to not throw something in there,
Yeah.
and it would have been better to not mess with Anakin's knighthood timeline either.
Hmm.
They really screwed
Or
us over with that.
or the entire Clone Wars timeline from beginning to end. Just maybe don't mess with that. We had, as I
Right.
said to you, and I definitely said this in the previous video, but it was one of the only times in the Star Wars universe where events were down to like the week, sometimes the day that it happened, because usually we're just told this happens in 43 ABY, this happened in 22 BBY, and it's just at some point in the year
Right.
this thing happened. But
Well,
Clone Wars was the first time they went, the third week of the Clone War, like it was precise. This timeline was divided up very, very deliberately, and then Filoni went up.
mm,
So that was pretty egregious. That was pretty horrific
right.
to have
Right.
happen.
I mean, it like, and that was the thing. Like, Plo Koon is perfect because he has, I think, only a handful of appearances in the
Mm-hmm.
comics,
Yep.
and regardless of what you're doing in the show, like you could easily work around his appearances in the comics. You can easily work around those.
Yeah.
Those are easy to adjust to because he's only a major significant portion. Like he only has a couple of major significant moments in the comics
Mm.
and books, and again, he's a side character in those.
Yeah.
You
Every
know,
single time. It's not focused on him.
right?
He's just along for the
Well,
ride.
and I got to say, an interesting thing to look at in the Jedi Order, the top three pilots are Anakin, Saesee Tiin, and Plo Koon. In that
Yeah.
order. In
Mm-hmm.
that order. They are the top
And
three pilots in the whole Jedi Order.
I mean,
Okay?
admittedly, Stacey Tin doesn't get a great look in either. So
Right, yeah. I mean, you
we'll,
could have
we'll,
focused
we'll
on him too.
you
Either
know,
one of them, really.
yeah,
I just think
fling him into
Plo
the mix.
allows more. What we have for Plo Koon, I think, allows for uh more expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Saesee, I think there's also a good area with him as well, but like we have we have actual timeline pinpoints with him, and that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
that like so I feel like there's certain things are a little more direct and would have caused more, I think,
Yeah.
timeline
As as
issues.
as you say, Plo Koon was a largely unknown for most of the
Right,
time. So you could have popped
right.
him in any
It's
conflict because, like, I don't
right,
know where he is. Where has
right,
he gone? And
right. But he's
and
implied to be a major general in the
mm,
story, but he's where is
he
he?
just he has disappeared. Yeah. So yeah, it definitely would have given writers a lot of flexibility there, and again, not to hammer it home, but his niece as well, because she becomes a very powerful Jedi in her own right. We see her quite young before episode one, and then we don't see boo of her until she's at the other end of her career, going toe to toe with Vader, and actually doesn't hold her own for very long. Spoiler alert, but holds her own
Yeah,
for long enough that clearly there's been some great training in the middle. Something has happened to this woman in the meantime that has seen her become a pretty great Jedi in her own right. And
right,
again, nothing, not a peep. I was like, well, you could have just shoved her in.
right,
And the other thing I definitely mentioned in the older videos was just the sheer size of the conflict is enormous, right? Like if you think about the example I gave was World War II here on Earth, right? That's
uh-huh,
probably our largest go-to conflict that we have in the modern era.
right,
And two things, we'll never run out of stories we can tell about World War II. Yeah, people will constantly make movies, there'll be new books, there'll be new TV series. But yeah, as I was briefly saying, and I don't know exactly what point I got up to, but when I was going over the fact that World War II is for Earth, modern history, our biggest conflict, and they're not running out of stories to tell. They're not running out of battles to talk about. They're not running out of brave heroes on any side to talk about. Like it's just this ongoing thing. And yet, in terms of the Star Wars universe, it would be lucky to be two panels in a comic because you hear about it all the time. There's like a war's been going on for 4 or 5 years on a planet, and it's just like the planet blah 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 has been a battle for 5 years, so the victors are here. Like, and that's kind of all it gets.
right,
So when the Clone Wars is such an enormous conflict, much bigger than anything we could fathom on this planet, and it stretches across the amount of planets that it did, the amount of systems that it did, with the amount of people involved that it did, the fact that you have to keep on revisiting and again an Obi-Wan to get a story out of it is absolutely bananas. And as you said, particularly when they've been flogged to death over and over in the novels, in the comics, in the micro series, and so on. We really could have somebody else. So, and not even necessarily Plo Koon. Plo Koon is a great choice.
Right.
but not necessarily Plo Koon. I mean, the amount of
Right.
stories still untold, the amount of planets not visited, the amount of conflicts not seen. It's almost extraordinary that we had to take two of the most notable characters from, say, the prequels, focus so hard on them, and then just wedge a small girl in the middle to somehow spice things up. And I was like,
Right.
well, yeah, it feels like it was taken away. It's actually quite funny. While we're going through that technical difficulty, I just opened up Facebook because apparently that's just a nervous habit I must have. And one of the first pages that popped up was some pop culture thing about how the Clone Wars had some of the best storytelling of all time. I thought, oh, that's
Mm,
nice. That's nice.
I
No.
mean, if you're going off of just the TV show itself, sure, but there are
Mm,
better stories overall. I mean, there are
yeah,
I mean, I would argue Shakespeare himself is a better writer than any of the writers that were
yeah,
on the Clone Wars. I mean, but that's just
yeah,
my opinion. But also, I mean, I also think that J.R.R. Tolkien is a fantastic writer, and he hated Shakespeare. So,
yeah. So what would we know? Look, I just know in 100 years' time, there's going to be Filoni and Shakespeare, and probably just one of them will be remembered for their writing.
oh,
So
I'm
there's
sure,
that.
I'm sure.
There's that. Yeah. No, look, definitely Plo Koon. I can see why that would be such a great one. But actually, there are other
Right?
characters that you could cover, and there were. It's not like it was just the Anakin and Obi-Wan show. In terms of it did cover other characters. We're not here saying that, I guess, but
No,
we really could have shifted that focus, particularly when it created more continuity errors than anything else. Like just
right.
so many.
I mean, if you look at the comics and the books versus this show,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like they took Anakin and they took Barriss Offee and they kind of switched their roles.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the Barriss Offee and Luminara's role, if you look at their roles,
Mm-hmm.
and because like Barriss is supposed to be Anakin's age in
Yep.
the comics and the books and whatnot, and so by aging her down, first of all, they did her a disservice just in doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and having Anakin be promoted ahead of her makes no sense.
No.
She's been in there since she was a child. He has been in, well, since she was a baby. He's been
Yeah.
in there since he was 10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he was 10. And that's something that a lot of people seem to not realize. He's 10 at the end of The Phantom Menace. He's 10.
Yeah. And that's very old for a Jedi trainee at that time.
Yeah, no kidding. Like
Yeah.
the minimum cutoff age, to my understanding, is 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Obviously, that's something that got thrown to the side later on, and pretty much anyone of any age could join. But yeah, for the time, for the era, for the Jedi Order, how strict they were on everything,
mhm.
very odd,
Oh yeah,
very odd.
yeah.
So as you say, to then fast track his progress past everyone else, chosen one or not, is it's a bit rude, I guess, for everyone else.
Well, and
And,
that's what I loved about the EU is that like he didn't get special treatment because he was the
mm,
chosen.
no.
Uh, and
And it
also
was there
there
were
were
misgivings. He was
misgivings.
untrusted,
Yeah.
like they weren't sure.
Mhm. I mean, even if they had like focused on actually, well, no, Barris would have been quite boring if they had used Barris from the EU, but like if they had focused on her, like very boring. She's a healer.
Rude.
A Jedi healer is not very exciting. Like,
We got two good novels out of it.
right, right. I'm
You
just saying,
know,
like, it's not good for it. Like, it wouldn't be good for a children's cartoon. It's just not.
yeah.
It's not the kind of thing you want to watch. Okay,
No.
like as much as I think that would have been fun, it's not the kind of thing you
Mm.
want to watch as a child.
No.
But
No.
it's more adult. That's more adult television, which
Yeah. Two
Star
seasons
Wars
of
is supposed to be
healing.
family television or family movies. Really, it's a family thing. It's not an adult specific thing. You
Although
gotta
now that I
you
get
gotta bear that in mind.
next time I read those novels though, back to back, I'm gonna try and now picture them within the realms of being a TV series and see how far I get. Probably not
Honestly,
very.
it'd probably be pretty good.
Yeah, it would definitely be slower paced.
Oh yeah. but
Hmm.
like we have hospital
More,
focus.
yeah.
We've had so many hospital TV shows. I mean,
Hmm.
from like specifically the '90s on, we
Yeah.
we've
Now that I think
we've had
about it, I mean,
so
again, I've largely just walked away from a lot of modern cinema and TV, but it does, yeah, I
many.
don't know if they do that much anymore. Like the golden age of Grey's
I think
Anatomy and
cops are
House.
more the thing still, and
Yeah.
which is funny considering everything that happened over here over the last like 5 years.
Oh no, do tell.
It's
We didn't notice. The foreigners went over here going, what?
honestly, I feel like I feel like there was honestly Stacey Teen would have been a great point of view
Hmm.
character because he get we watch him get killed. We straight up see Palpatine kill him. We could have stopped right at
Yep.
Revenge of the Sith. We could have led right up to that point. It
Hmm.
would have been a fantastic focal point because he just has a couple of side appearances as well. Much like Plo Koon, I think about the same level of coverage overall when it comes to the Clone Wars, and
Yeah. Yeah, not much, basically. Not
uh,
much.
I think he might have had a little more than Plo Koon in the pre episode 2 stuff, but
Hmm.
I don't think a whole lot more. But
No,
again, like, and that's the thing. These are the two greatest pilots besides Anakin
Anakin.
Skywalker, and they get very little coverage. Like
Hmm.
we're told throughout the comics and the books that they are amazing pilots.
Yeah, they both should be given the title of Tan.
Right.
That's what we've
Like,
worked out from
right. We're told
1978
that they're
Dredger.
great pilots. We're
Yeah.
told they're great pilots, and yet
Hmm.
somehow we're not told how.
No.
Like we're not told how, when, what. Like we're not told anything about them. I believe we are told with Plo Koon that he got his recognition as a pilot during the Stark Hyperspace War.
Hmm.
I believe that I believe we're told that, and that comes up. I know that comes up multiple times, but I distinctly remember that because I think is it Obsession? No, it's not Obsession.
Hmm.
It's one of the story arcs in
The
in
Republic
Republic
series.
Comics. I do
Yeah.
remember it being in there. I don't think it's Obsession. I only got a few comics. Obsession is the only one that when I was actually getting the comics, my dad bought them for me, so they were mailed to me because I didn't live with him.
Hmm.
We lived in different states.
Yeah.
It's like I don't I it's like living like he lived in New York at the time. I've never left Illinois except for 1 year of school.
Nice.
And
Solid.
like
And
as
I've
far as
never been to
living,
Illinois.
I've lived here in Illinois. Um,
Hmm.
I'm actually probably I live relatively close to where I grew up, but
Yeah, I'm guilty of that.
it's a thing. It's a
My
thing.
childhood home is 20 minutes that way.
Mm.
You know, I
My
haven't gone
teenage
far.
year my teenage years are a half hour. My 17 to 20 something years are an hour, and my childhood is an hour. It's like, but it's a
Yeah.
different direction an hour. Like
Yeah.
it's just it's everywhere.
Yeah, we
Anyway,
haven't gone far. I mean, the end of that is that we're not living in our parents' basements like people assume.
right,
That's what you were getting at, right? Yeah,
right.
cool. We don't even have basements in Australia, so I can't live in there.
You don't have,
So
well, I've got a dungeon, so
fantastic, fantastic.
that's what
I'm
I
not
got.
coming.
That's what I got.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know,
I got a 2-story house with a dungeon
everyone's got to have a hobby. That's
and a
fine.
detached garage that's in the
Oh
backyard.
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
You might want to try reattaching it at some point. But
So
anyway,
it's pretty far away. It's like we'd have to build a tunnel.
sounds like fun. That sounds like a fun day out. Building a tunnel. Oh boy. But
Anyway,
yeah, no,
I
and I
mean,
mean, oddly enough, to just to fly in the face of everything we've just said for like the past hour and whatever. The other thing that I'd probably say with the Clone Wars is we also could have moved away from the Jedi almost entirely in
oh
terms of
yeah,
storytelling.
I mean, tell the
I mean,
story of like like tell like Ram Koda's militia, like
yeah,
he just
Hmm.
happens to be the general and focus on like a couple of like a couple of like officers in the
There's
in
so
that
much
militia.
else going on, when
Like,
the conflict is largely clones versus battle droids, we're focusing on the generals. It's like, well,
right.
there
My
is a
favorite,
lot
honestly, my
happening.
favorite parts of the Clone Wars were actually the episodes that focused on the senators. Those were my favorites
Fair enough.
because I most of the
Well,
most
it was
of
a yeah.
those characters were already established in the movies. Most of them
Hmm.
were, and I think one I think they had only one original senator in that whole thing. And
Hmm.
like Anaconda Far, I don't think he appears in the Phantom Menace or any or Attack of the Clones,
Yeah.
but he is a George Lucas character.
Hmm.
George Lucas named him, which I thought was an interesting factoid that I recently found out. Shout out to Iron
Oh yeah.
Inquisitor. You did a great job. I love you. You educate me a lot more than most of the other EU people I follow. Sorry, Quinlan.
Oh, but yeah, no, absolutely 100%. Like the amount of focus you could have had on different characters, different factions, different planets, just
Oh,
go far
seriously.
afield.
I mean,
Um,
seriously, even if we were to go from the other perspective, the other side, focus on the separatist community,
mhm.
just look at them, look at their actual volunteer militias.
Yep.
Because like that's the thing, the show really showed a lot of it was clones versus
Yeah.
droids. Virtually every episode where there was a battle, that's what it was. It's like,
Which would not be realistic.
right. And
Yeah.
like there were only 200,000 with a million additional added
Yeah.
into the war, like
Hmm.
through the course of the war. And yes, they were pumping out more and they were getting them out as fast as they could, but it takes 10 years to get a clone to a comfortable point.
Yeah.
Probably get away with 8, but it's still pushing
Yeah.
it. you know, they're a little young when if you're doing it in 8 years. They're a
Yeah.
little young.
All you can do is go to Wayland and get a whole bunch of clones that are completely mad. That's all you can do.
Right.
Then you can spit them out real fast.
Right. You wanna get Sparky clones? Fine. You wanna have a bunch of mad clones, go ahead. You
Go
you
ahead and
do
knock
that.
yourself out.
You do that
Yeah. So
insanity.
yeah, the amount of just different private militias, planetary militias, defense forces around the galaxy that would have been involved that we don't see boo of is insane. Because
Right.
even even if you go, yeah, again, episode one, yeah, a planet as peaceful as Naboo gets blockaded, and they still put up their own militia, both the Naboo and the Gungans,
Yeah.
putting forward militaries, which gives it a really different
Right.
flavor. And
Which I
yet
thought
somehow
was
during the
weird. The Gungan, the one episode that was really kind of focused on Jar Jar, which I hated, but that whole
poor
thing,
Jaja.
like, well, actually, there were a couple of episodes that were focused on Jar Jar,
Mm,
and they were just bad, and they mistreated Jar Jar in that show too.
yeah.
But when you look at like they had a whole episode, they had a couple of episodes on Naboo, and they had one that was Gungan focused, like truly
Hmm.
Gungan focused, and they just didn't have anything about the Gungans being warriors, which is made very clear. It's like, well, the Gungans, you give them access to ships, and they'll be amazing fighters
Yeah.
across the like. Granted,
They've
they're the
all.
Naboo militia by the time of Attack of the Clones, but
Mm,
like they're the chief and for they're the primary military of the planet.
they've also got
The
their own
Naboo are
natural
peaceful,
tech.
and you know.
Mm. But in
So
terms of the tech that they use, it's geared towards battle droids. Like
right,
it's this
their
naturally
tech is
perfect
great for battle
technology.
droids.
Yeah.
Like especially after the Phantom Menace. Like, come on,
Hmm.
they should have been fighting like they should have been all over
Yeah,
You
but no,
know,
back in the swamp,
like I
back in
feel
the swamp.
like they should have had like that's one of the things that bothers me is that all the clone battalions are just clones. Like I
Yeah.
feel like, and that's part of why, like, when I look at it, like a lot of my fan fiction revolves around this idea that, they should be having conscripts, because it's
Hmm.
clear they do have conscripts. Um,
Very early on, yeah.
like, you should have a mishmash. Sure,
Mm.
they could all wear the same armor. Who cares? You
Yeah.
know, what? There's no rule that says the conscripts can't wear clone armor. Like,
And that gives it a second kind of level as well of storytelling. Because I know one of my favorite, going back to World War II, sorry,
mhm.
Band of Brothers, which is just an absolutely fantastic TV series. If you
Oh yeah,
haven't watched it, sit down, watch it.
I should.
Um,
I've been told. I've been told I should watch it.
there is a point at one point where new conscripts join because obviously there's the guys that they landed with and they go through a few battles, and at some point though you do need to replenish those that have fallen, and the new conscripts that turn up, well, not really, I mean they're enlisted, but when they turn up there is definitely a different dynamic, and I guess you see it in a lot of war movies or whatever where there's a different dynamic between the veterans who've already been through some stuff and have formed a bond, and there's a bunch of newbies turning up, and it's a mix of they don't want to get too close to them because they just figure these guys don't know what they're doing. They're just going to die really quickly, and I've already had to lose comrades, so I'm not going to be watching that happen again. Um, yeah, it creates really different dynamics between the troops. So it would have also been interesting to see, which just
Hmm.
didn't happen.
Well, right.
Um,
Well,
a lot of drop balls there.
well,
Oddly
and I
enough,
think
with
that's
the whole
partially
series.
George Lucas's fault in that area, because it's indicated that, like, if you go through the 501st journal, like, they go over the fact that they're uncomfortable with the regular human conscripts
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
under the Empire. And
Hmm.
should they have had to work
Conscripts.
with
Yeah.
regular human conscripts before this? Like, I don't understand that. The logic to me doesn't settle.
No. Well, you've already got you've got regular people in the Navy
Right,
very early on, the Republic Navy. They're just regulars, they're not clones.
right.
So
Like, so to me,
yeah.
it just didn't make sense. And, like, I felt like they thought that I felt like they were making the clones too prominent, considering
Mhm.
that by like by say like the end of year one, they had like 12 1,200,000 clones. Like,
Which just is
that's
not enough.
right.
That's
What?
not enough.
Right. Well,
You consider the span of the galaxy, it's like one clone troop to every three planets or something. Like it's it's not enough.
right. It's like there's no way that, like, so many that all these battles can be waged at once, and even
Mm,
the droids, they can't manufacture enough droids for every
no.
battle to be clones versus droids. It's
Hmm.
impossible. Okay,
Yeah.
it's impossible with the number of people dying. It is impossible.
Hmm.
Like, not to mention the number of droids destroyed. It's
Yeah.
impossible. You can't keep up on
And
either
every
end.
and every
Like,
planet, as you said, every planet involved, even the Naboo had a defense force of some sort, and every planet involved
right,
is going to have its own army. The fact that they just kind of sit by and let the drones duke it out for them is bizarre.
right,
So there would have been, and it's a really, really good opportunity to explore the galaxy because some of these planets we've only heard of in passing, or a name, or the planet is named because it's somebody's home planet, so to say.
like,
You don't
not to
get to
mention the
see
number
much
of
of it.
planets that have their own militias by this
Hmm.
point. Like, because they had, and
Yeah.
that was a huge stink in the Senate under well, actually, before Valorum even. Like,
Hmm.
and Valorum, oh, he had the worst of it. Like, the guy just got handed the worst deal. But you know,
Yeah.
looking at the Clone Wars, like, they should have looked at it from, like, you have all these planetary militias. Like, clearly it's not just going to be the clones.
Mm.
Okay, you cannot have a war this big that's just clones. You can't.
I'm almost wondering though, maybe, and not to give Filoni any due because no,
Mhm.
but to give him some due anyway, is that I'm wondering if it would have got too confusing for a younger audience. And I only say that because I know
That's true.
in the micro series in particular, there's a battle on Dak, Mon Calamari, the underwater thing. And I think I remember seeing a bit of critique that a lot of viewers didn't know what they were watching because it was all, you were just thrust into the battle and there's ships you don't recognize versus ships you don't recognize. And so you're just like,
Right.
So there is at least there's some kind of consistency if you're watching it, and every week is clones versus droids, clone versus droids, clone versus, you know who the good guys are, you know who the bad guys are,
Right.
or do you?
Right.
But
Well, you think you know.
you think you know. And but yeah, so that's anything that if every week is a new militia versus whatever the the clones could
Mhm.
work out, it's just like, yeah, maybe there would have been some confusion, admittedly, because I know that was the
Well,
thing they had
especially
with,
at the
but
start, I think.
yeah.
I think more at the start. I think once you get past the first season, you can go into more of that kind of stuff. Like,
Mm,
so like I get what you're saying. So you can't really go too far, but even if they had focused more on like, and they did this a little bit, they did focus more on the clones, and that was
yeah.
fine. My problem was the
Mm,
way that they had clones questioning orders when it was clearly stated that they're not supposed to be able to do that.
yeah.
Like there, it doesn't even cross their minds. Their
Unless they're
brains are
commandos.
wired to obey orders, except for the
Mm,
ARC troopers and the second generation commanders.
yeah.
So like the characters who should never who should be able to question orders, are like Alpha, Fordo, Cody, Bly,
Mm,
Apo, those characters, and in theory Rex, if he exists,
yeah.
because Rex is supposed to be in
Put
the
Rex
second
over there.
version.
Yeah, put him over
Because
there somewhere.
like he well because in if you go through the process, Rex and Cody are the supposed Rex is supposed to be part of Cody and Bly's generation.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like,
Hmm.
like, but that was the other thing. Rex kind of took a place that shouldn't have been, and also Atbo was, for some reason, he was a corporal at one point, and then he was a lieutenant, and it got very
Uh,
confusing.
are
I
you
was like,
suggesting the writers were mixing things up?
I mean, it was weird enough with Fordo. They got confused with Fordo's. He was a sergeant at one point, and even
Mm.
though even though when we first meet him, he's a captain, and I'm like, wait, how is he a sergeant? He's an ARC trooper.
What's
ARC
going
troopers
on
aren't
here?
sergeants.
Yeah, what's happening? Yeah, no, it's yeah. It
They didn't know what they were
does it
doing.
feel rushed? I'm not really sure what it is because I guess it's one of the things I liked about New Jedi Order is the fact that they sat down and planned everything out before they
Right,
wrote anything.
right.
I'm not sensing a lot of that with this series in general.
I
And
don't think
maybe
they
there
did.
was
I mean,
loose.
the more political stuff I feel like was a little more drawn out, and of course that give full credit to Katie Lucas.
Hmm.
She was the one responsible for that.
Yeah.
She's the one who took care of that stuff. Wonderful. What like her she's a great storyteller. I honestly
Hmm.
wish she would do I wish she would write more screenplays, just like
Generally.
just do more. Like
Yeah.
like
Do more with what you've got. Yeah. No,
right, because
absolutely.
she's so
Yeah.
good. She writes interesting stories. And
Hmm.
I think the story, I think it would be a fantastic way to watch. I
Yeah.
love watching her stuff. Yeah, like her stuff was the stuff that like actually held my interest the most.
Hmm.
It was the
When
stuff
you
that I
start,
wasn't
yeah.
goofing around in the background with it just on in the background. When I determined to watch the whole thing straight through. Like
Hmm.
when I determined that like most of the episodes I was goofing around because I was like, this is not that interesting. And then like her episodes, I was like, this actually holds my interest. Like,
Mm. This
and
has got
every
my
time I found,
attention.
and every time it held my interest, I watched and I saw who wrote it, and it was Katie Lucas. I'm like, of course it was.
Yep. You could set your watch to it. Yeah.
Right, like that's the thing. Like she's good.
Hmm.
she's good. And here we are at 10 minutes.
Hoorah. Um,
Yeah.
well, is that closing then? Quick closing statements. Go. Um,
Yeah, yeah, you go ahead.
Look, well, I don't really have much to throw in that we haven't already said, but it
Yeah.
really is just the fact that I do feel like it was another drop ball. Now,
Oh, it
my
was.
my biggest things do continue to be continuity. The fact that up
Mhm.
until that point, continuity had been
Right,
so important, and the authors had done tremendous things in the past.
right.
Like I'm thinking probably more specifically about, say, the Han Solo trilogy of novels and how well intertwined they were with the Han Solo adventures that came out earlier, or something like Dark Horse doing Vector, where you've got one story arc that effectively covers four really different time periods flawlessly and intermingles with it. But this happened on a daily basis, and the
Right.
aforementioned Abel G. Pena, the fact that he went through and basically sticky taped so many different other eras together to create these wonderful cohesive
Oh, yeah.
storylines. Continuity was such a massive thing, and then to have it kind of flung to the wayside with
Right.
this series, that was a first drop ball. There's no way that ever should have happened. In fact, the thing that I didn't mention, and I probably should have mentioned first of all, we're here just saying how we should have made the Clone Wars better, what would have made the series better, what kind of going back to the beginning, I don't think we needed it. I know when it first came
Honestly,
out, I
we
thought,
really didn't.
why? No, it's like if you are going to do a TV series, just by all means. I mean, Star Wars effectively should have been made for TV long before that.
Right.
But to cover an era that had been absolutely saturated to death at that point, particularly then, because there was such excitement over the
Mhm.
Clone Wars, which is probably why they did it. But there was so much excitement over the movies that we already had comic arcs that covered the whole era. We already had
Right.
a micro series. We already had all these other things and games and so on. It did feel a bit silly to do it yet again when they said they were doing a Clone Wars animated series. I'm like, we've already you
You
just
did
did
this.
that.
You did
Like,
this.
yeah, we could have anything else. We could have an Old Republic animated series. We could have a New Rebellion animated series. We could have a Legacy animated series. We could, you name it, we could do it. We could do Shadows of the Empire as an animated series. That'd be fun. Yeah,
Oh,
you name
that
it.
would be
The
amazing.
amount of things. Yeah, and then of course, what were they going to call it? Underworld, wasn't it? The one that they were going to do,
Yeah. Or yeah,
which would
that
have
would
been
have
fun.
been great.
Well, it would have been amazingly gritty because you're thrown into this universe that's very familiar yet different because the Republic has just collapsed. People don't quite know what to do, so you get to have a lot of character growth through everything, like the criminal empires, the Jedi who remain, the clone troopers that have just wandered off, the ones that haven't wandered off, the empire growing, the politics. That would have been a fantastic TV series. I'm not quite sure why we had to do the Clone Wars when there were so many other eras left begging. But to say that they've done it, okay, cool. Now that they've decided to do it, why it wasn't more integrated with the existing story arcs, with the existing characters, and why the focus wasn't shifted? Because I know that the post Return of the Jedi stuff kind of got blamed for having Skywalkeritis, where it just seemed to follow Luke's adventures everywhere. They're like,
Right.
for goodness sake, can we just move away from Force users and the Skywalkers for 5 minutes? Can we have a different story? And
No.
that's what people kind of, yeah, no. And that's what people were begging for. And then the Clone Wars comes out like, hey guys, do you like Anakin? Cool. Hello. Here's that. Like, it just turned into the Anakin and Obi-Wan show again.
Right.
And of course, as we said, it wasn't. There were definitely different arcs to cover different characters. And I'm not saying that, but
But they were
we
the
really,
primary
that
focus.
was still the primary focus. And then again, as I said, it was weird that they made them the primary focus and then shoved somebody in the middle to detract from that focus at the same time. It's really weird, really,
Made
really
the whole
weird.
thing bizarre.
Yeah, and as you say, she could have been so much better done as Plo Koon's apprentice or any other number of Jedi. Plo Koon makes the most sense, definitely. And as I
Hulk
said,
makes no sense. I think she could. I think Stacey Teen could have been a good master for her. Honestly,
yep.
if they had done that, that would have
Mm-hmm.
also been an interesting dynamic. I think because with what we have of his personality, I think that would have been an interesting personality. I think that would have been an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Personally, I just feel like if they had to do a Clone Wars story, they could have focused on a different set of characters.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And like that's
Yeah.
just how I feel about it because like it could have worked. It could have
Mm-hmm.
worked. It didn't
Yeah.
necessarily need to exist because again, we've done the Clone Wars and there were And
to death.
I guarantee there would have been more books and comics written eventually anyway, because there's
Yeah,
all sorts of things that just haven't been touched on. And
different
that's the thing.
battles that were taking
E-
place.
even the Galactic Civil War still had books coming out
Mm,
during towards the end
of course.
before the Disney sale. I was like, because
Yeah.
there were some I didn't know existed, and then I'm like going through like all the available Star Wars audiobooks and on the app that I use, and I'm like, wait, the publish date, what? Like
Yeah. When did that come out?
what,
Well, I mean,
2011? What? Like
yeah.
like
Well,
what? We
when
have
you
books coming out this late for the Galactic Civil War, and we still have like I'm like
it would have been endless. It would have been endless because the amount of different planets that were going through different things, made different factions. It was
right,
galaxy wide. It's an enormous galaxy, and we just haven't touched
right.
on so much of it.
I mean,
But then I was going to say, when you think about two of the last great novels to come out for the EU, which would have been Kenobi and Plagueis, I would say would be two of the last great novels of the
those are
EU.
the two last great novels of the year.
Yeah,
Those are.
and to think that they came out at the most populated part of the timeline, like Kenobi takes place right at the end of this is a very very clumped area in terms of the time when you look at where the stories are, and then Plagueis taking part mainly during the prequels, again stunned to death, but the stories had this amazing continuity where they just weaved into what was existing and
Mhm.
enhanced it greatly. And of course, one of the novels is about Kenobi, a character who's been done to death, but yet we still got some fresh looks at him, some fresh insights to him, and something that actually meant and gave more to that character. There's no way you can just say, oh, they'd already touched on everything, so the Clone Wars is the best we could do. It's like, no, you could definitely have done a lot better than that.
Oh
But
yeah.
that's what we got, and it destroyed continuity in the process. So
Oh yeah.
hurrah! Which had the EU continued, I'm sure they would have kept on retconning things to try and make it work.
Oh yeah. That's the thing.
But to use an analogy, and then I'll let you do your closing bit. To use the analogy that I used previously on this show, I think was that retcons are a tool to fix what was accidentally broken. So again, old comics that were written even before Empire Strikes Back come out, somebody took a guess and they got that guess wrong. A retcon is great to fix that. A retcon isn't there so I can just come in and write whatever the hell I want and you have to come in and clean up my mess. It's the difference between me coming to your house and accidentally spilling a drink and saying, oh, do you have a mop? Like, can we clean this? Because the mop is the retcon. That's the tool you would use. Or me coming into your house holding a drink and looking in the eyes and going, do you have a mop? Good. Bloosh. And then making the mess. Like, that's what Filoni's done. He's just come and said, you guys can fix this later.
Oh yeah.
And really unfair on everyone else.
Oh,
And
it is unfair
yeah.
to everybody. But yeah. So yeah, thank you, Jeff, for joining me
Yeah.
for one last Clone Wars thing. I'm going to
He
try to avoid.
promises.
I'm going to try to avoid Clone Wars altogether, and I will not bring Jeff in if I do another Clone Wars thing. It will just be me because I promised him this is the end. So thank you guys for watching. This is probably the last time I'm going to cover the Clone Wars. Next time we come together, I promise it will be some other Star Wars thing. So yes, so
Or
yeah, thank you
Firefly.
guys. Right. Oh yeah, or Firefly. Maybe next time.
Maybe.
But yeah, so thank you guys for watching, and may the force be with you. Bye, Jeff.
Indeed. Oh, bye. Thanks again.